Some of you might recall that financial crisis that happened a bit back circa 2008-ish. At the time, I was working in a call center for retirement accounts such as 401x or 403bs. For any non-Americans, these are plans from your employer where you can contribute a portion of your salary, and usually they will also contribute something as well to save for retirement. This is probably the biggest way that Americans save for the end. As the account holder, you have control over how the money is invested, usually from a small selection of different mutual funds. Also, at the call center, I had some experience. I knew what I was talking about and was able to speak with confidence in my voice. Therefore, I was on the escalated line. This is reserved for the people who want to talk to a manager. I was not a manager, but I and others like me got these calls. In some rare cases, we actually fixed a problem, but more often than not, just told the customer the same thing they had just heard from the first rep, only with that level of confidence. Then they hung up as a happy customer. We also had the ability to review previous calls to the center. So one day in April of 2009, an irate client was transferred to me. He had just gotten his quarterly financial statement, showing that he was invested in several different funds that were affected by the stock market. His complaint was that he had called a month earlier to request that his stock market-based investments be moved to something more stable and less risky. At that time, the news was all doom and gloom, leading people to make majorly ill-informed financial decisions. This didn't happen. As I reviewed the transaction history on his account, I confirmed that whoever he had spoken to previously had only redirected new contributions into stable funds, but had made no change to any existing balance. I told the gentleman that I could review the call, and if our rep had made a mistake, adhere to his wishes. I then tried to say something else, but was quickly cut off. Yes, review that call. I want my money out of the market. I tried to say something like, okay, but sir, only to be cut off again. This was not a man with a small account balance. At the time, it was $500K, meaning that at the beginning of the crisis, he probably had around $1 million in his account. I reviewed the call, and yes, our rep had made a mistake. I went through the process to retroactively conduct his requested transactions. The rep got a negative mark on his record for making a mistake, but the customer really got the short end. For those that don't know, the low point in the market was in early March of that year. Many stocks and markets rebounded enormously and very quickly. What I wanted to tell the guy was something like Fund A is up 28% since the day you made that call. Fund B is up 32% and so on. But as he didn't give me the chance to tell him to think about his request, well, that is why I'm posting here. As my company had to backdate his transactions, he instantly lost that $150 in his account and missed out on the boom. Of course, he called later to complain. But even after our mistake, we had done exactly as he had asked. I hope he is enjoying his retirement. I just received the forms for this year's food festival, and I was reminded of what happened last year. After the first quarantine, the mayor in my city decided to organize a food festival in August. Because it was a success, it has become an annual event. I've taken part on both of them and planning to take part this year also. While most participants go with tried and true handheld to a degree recipes, I use it to try new things that maybe update my menu. Anyway, to the story. As a crew, we had the experience of the previous year of what about to expect. I had gone with one tweak of a standing recipe I had, pulled pork sandwiches, and one new one. The new one was a sandwich with smoked sausage, grilled onions, peppers and eggplant, and a feta cheese sauce. Since the opening hours for the festival were 11:00 to 23:00, we planned on having a 3-man crew, 2 cooks, 1 apprentice, on site with enough food to cover the rush hour of lunch and restoke when the crew changed. At 17, if they needed anything, they would give us a call and we would bring it from the shop. We were about 500 yards away. That fateful August day, we received a call from the crew around 13:00 that they were running low on vegetables and cheese sauce. Apparently, a cruise ship had anchored outside of the city's port and had debarked most of their passengers for 12 hours in the city, and most of them hit the food festival. So I grab a portable fridge, load it with vegs and sauce, and head to stand. Having a pass, I move fast through the entrance. One entrance and one official exit for both staff and visitors, but I catch some glares. As I stepped inside the food court, I noticed that almost every stand had a big line in front of them. As I move past our line to reach the stand's door, I hear people shouting, "Hey, where are going?" and get back in line. I'm almost at the door when someone grabs my shoulder, which for various reasons connected to my past, is not a good move. I turn around to see a gray-headed older man, dressed in classic tourist attire, light yellow shirt, khaki shorts, white socks, and sandals and a hat. Tourist, still holding my shoulder. "You can't cut the line like this. People are waiting." Me. First, remove your hand. Second, I need to cut the lie. "Tourist, No. You need to go back in line. At that point, one of my cooks is almost hanging over the counter, waiting for the ingredients, and I'm starting to lose my temper. But I give another try. Me. I need to go in there to G. Tourists now red in the face and shouting, "No!" You need to get back in line and wait for your food. Young people, this days, mumbling, well, that was it for trying. Time for my inner Neanderthal. Me forcibly removing his hand from my shoulder.
Me not cut line, you no eat.
Gage. He looks at me shocked when finally my cook shouted, "Hey, boss. Can I have this stuff now?" I handed him the fridge and told him not to tell to that guy. My cook's reply, "I know better than to feed wild animal." This happened when I was just out of high school. When I was in grade 9 and 10, my best friend and I hung out together constantly. We had known each other through sports when we were younger, but it wasn't until high school we really started hanging out. I have to say, this story has 3 people. Me, my best friend, and his jerk buddy who never liked me for whatever reasons. Anyways, at the time I was into punk rock and he was into folk hippie music. His favorite was Neil Young. I would laugh and poke fun at him for his crap music, and I admit I never knew who he was or his music. One day I was helping my best friend clean his room. His mom said he couldn't go out until it was done, so I helped, and I came across a Neil Young tape. I remember it had 2 albums, After the Gold Rush and Harvest. Again, I poke fun about his taste in music, and he said to me, "You know, you shouldn't make fun of his music if you've never listened to it." For whatever reason, it dawned on me that he was right. So I told him, "You know what? You're right. You're right. I'll take this home, listen to it, and I'll poke fun at you tomorrow." Fair enough. So I go home and listen to the first song on After the Gold Rush. The song was Tell Me Why. I couldn't believe how much I loved it. The style, the acoustic guitars, the harmonizing. I ended up listening to it 3 times in my parents' kitchen, and then I listened to the whole album. I was blown away, and the next day I told him, "Sorry, I was wrong," and Neil Young is now one of my favorites. He actually was the one that got me out of punk music and into the 60s, 70s hippie sort of music. So we hang out constantly for a couple years, and things are great. One day we're hanging out listening to Neil, getting some puffs in on a reefer when we both agreed that we wanted to see Neil Young play live one day. We made a pact that if we ever stopped being friends, if life ever got in the way of our friendship and we drifted apart, that we would still, no matter what, go see Neil together. Sounded like a great plan. So a couple years go by, and of course we had drifted apart. We both had new friends and hardly ever spoke anymore. One day I got a call from him out of the blue. He says, "Neil Young is going to Calgary for a show. Are we going?" I was super excited and, I guess in a sentimental, nostalgic way, felt nothing but good love for my old friend. We hung out again, and we were both so stoked that our old promise came to fruition. Supposed to be the show of a lifetime, right? Of course not. Now I have to tell you, during the 2 years we had drifted apart, he started hanging with the one I called Jerk. He and I never got along, and that's that. I didn't know why he liked the guy so much, since he was always a total jerk to almost everyone, and he never had any money. Always bumming, smokes, weed, food, all the time. So the day of our road trip comes up, and I'm super happy. I drive to my boyfriend's place to pick him up, and all is well. Once he gets in my car, he says, "Hey man, we got to stop by the Jerk's place so I can drop off a sweater." I thought that was weird since it wasn't cold out, and hardly a desperate need for a sweater on a nice weekend. But he did have a thick sweater in his hand, so whatever. This jerk wants his sweater. This is where things go downhill. We pull up to the Jerk's place, and there's the piece of crap standing on his stoop with an overnight bag. I turn to my best friend and say, "What the heck, dude? Why does he have a bag?" My friend proceeds to tell me that he invited him along, and he admitted he lied to me because he knew no way in hell I would drive to go get him. I told him I thought this was our thing, Neil Young, as promised years ago. He felt bad, I guess, but nowhere near as bad as I think he should have felt. Anyways, the drive to Calgary was them having a great time with me driving the whole 712 hours. The Jerk, of course, had no smokes, no weed, nothing but enough money he was hoping would be enough for a cheap nosebleed section ticket. At least he wouldn't be sitting with us, though. The Jerk didn't even offer up a cent for the hotel either. We went to the concert, had an awesome, amazing time, and I was hoping things would be looking up. After the concert, I decided to go out with a couple friends I hadn't seen in a couple years. They lived in that city, obviously. We went out, without my friend and his Jerk, and had drunken, awesome time. It was the first time I tried ecstasy, and I have to say I was wrecked. I ended up parking in downtown Calgary and walking a long way to find my hotel. I eventually found it and went up to the room and ended up passing out underneath the sink by the bathroom around 3 a.m. I somehow managed to wake up an hour before checkout, and man, I felt like total crap. So hungover and not feeling all that hot, those were the days. So I packed up my heavy bag and my guitar, I used to play in a band with my friend in high school, so I thought it would be nice to sing our old songs on the trip. Never did because of the jerk. I leave the room carrying what felt like 1,000 pounds of crap to the lobby, only to see my friend and the jerk sitting there happily eating breakfast. I talked to them for a minute to tell them I had to go find my car as it was somewhere in downtown Calgary. They smile and say, sure, they'll be waiting for me in the restaurant. I go lugging my heavy crap, and it took me well over an hour of walking all over downtown looking for this stupid car. I almost collapsed when I turned a corner and finally found the car. My arms are killing me. The hangover is killing me, and all I can think of is getting into the car for the terrible drive home. The sooner I get into the car, the sooner I can get home. I put my stuff down and go into my coat pocket. No keys. I'm frantic as I look in every pocket I have. No keys. I was pissed. I somehow knew my friend and the jerk had something to do with this. To make things worse, while looking for my car, I ended up going in all directions, so I was confused as to where my hotel was now. It took me about half an hour to find it, all while still carrying my heavy stuff. I finally find the hotel and angrily go into the restaurant, and I see my friend and the jerk smiling at me like I was the butt of some joke. I marched up to them with fire in my eyes and their deaths on my mind. I looked at my friend and said slowly with lots of anger, "Give me my freaking keys now."
He laughs and hands them to me.
I asked why the heck he would take my keys from my coat as I was passed out. His reason was moronic. He told me I knew you were pissed that the jerk came along with us, so I took your keys so I would know I have them, and you couldn't take off home and leave us in another city. I asked why the heck he would let me go look for my car without my keys when he knew full well I didn't know exactly where my car was, and I was going to have to do a major search in a huge downtown area. I don't recall his answer, but it was likely a stupid smile, like he had pranked me or something. I looked at both of them and said without a lick of heat, "I'm leaving this place right this second, and I'm not coming back. If you and the jerk aren't right behind me to get the car, I'm leaving to drive the 7-1-2-hour drive home alone." They literally laughed at me like I was a joke to them, as if they were so important I would never go through with what I said. Their laughs faded away as I again walked to get my car. Of course, I didn't go back, and I got in my car, went to the local gas station for directions to the highway home, long before Google Maps and internet, and happily went on my way. I heard later from my friend he didn't cut me off completely after that, surprisingly, and he told me how once I left, he and the jerk both were like, "He's joking, hey, what do you think?" No, he would never ditch us here. No way. They waited, and they finally realized the worst. I kept my word and went back home without them. My friend told me they tried to hitchhike home, but no one would pick them up. Then he told me it started to rain super bad. I knew because it rained a lot on my comfortable drive home. My friend said he eventually had to beg someone back home to send him money so they could rent a car. That's basically the end of it. I had told my friend that I felt he ruined our trip by bringing along someone he knew didn't like me. So I don't see how he would have thought I was joking about leaving them, especially after he stole my keys and laughed after he knew I'd be screwed once I found my car. He also knew how sick and hungover I was. It's funny because I was reminded of this story when I saw my friend at the local Safeway store today. He never held a grudge against me, nice to say. The jerk, however, for the next 20 years would see me and yell Calgary as a hello and a goodbye. I see him around once a year, and last time at the bar he was a bit drunk and all his anger came out again. All that was because of me telling the people at the bar what he was so pissed about, and us all, minus the jerk, having a good laugh. This happened to me a while ago, and I thought you folks would get a kick out of it. I had reported to work on this particular Monday, where I am the site supervisor for an armed security account, only to discover that the blasted idiots that worked the night shift had not only left me an empty coffee pot, a mortal sin, but had entirely cleaned me out of coffee, leaving me naught but an empty container devoid of my much-needed morning caffeine, the inconsiderate so. And so's, grumbling, I go off to the local market to buy some caffeinated goodness so as to keep my heart beating through my busy day. Mind you, I am in uniform, which means black pants, dress shirt with my badge and various security emblems, my duty belt with firearm, baton, handcuffs, etc., etc. For the sake of those squeamish folk out there that go all white in the face when they see a firearm, I've also donned a windbreaker with security written across the back in 6-foot-high day, glow yellow letters. In other words, I look nothing like any of the folk who worked at this market whose uniform consisted entirely of a green apron. Now, mind you, I probably could have handled this better, but I was grumpy. It was a Monday morning without coffee after all. So I am standing just inside the door of the market reading the chalkboard where they have written their menu for the small cafe they run when this entitled wench on her cell phone walks up to me and tries to hand me a slip of paper.
Look, I'm a bit confused, but I take it and give it a look.
But as soon as I do, the entitled wench makes a little shooing motion, walks away and sits down at a bench by the door. Never says a word to me, doesn't even really look at me, barely acknowledges my existence and just walks off. So I'm kind of annoyed, you might say. Look at this piece of paper and it's a list of, you guessed it, groceries. What? So I wander over and politely inquire as to what exactly this is and why she had seen fit to hand it to me. Or my grocery list, of course. Fetch them for me. I'm in a hurry and can't be bothered. I'm on a very important phone call. And again, with a shooing motion. Now, I've been going to this market for 9 to 5 years, and I can assure you they don't fetch your groceries for you. So, after some consideration, I very carefully rolled her list into a tight little ball, dropped it on her lap, and loudly growled at her to get moving and do her own shopping, turn around and walk off. I hear her screeching out something behind me, but I just ignore her and keep walking. Now, at this point, I'm seriously thinking that she will take the hint, see the day, glow letters on my jacket, and buy a clue. But oh no, she's just not that smart. She instead chases me down and starts yelling about how she's going to get me fired, and I need to fetch her groceries right now. Trying to remain calm, I politely, honest, but forcefully tell her again, very clearly, I don't work here. Do your own damn shopping, lady, and leave. Thinking that's the end of it. Off I go to get a cup of wonderful hot coffee at the cafe and then move on to the aisle of heaven, where I'm busily perusing the fine selection of lovely roasted goodness, when who should appear but the entitled wench with a gentleman in tow. She's loudly berating him about his lazy workers and demanding I be fired on the spot. The poor gentleman looks confusedly at me, then at her and informs her he doesn't work here. We don't employ security, ma'am. Being a bit of a jerk, I wave at her, give her a big smile, and agree with him. She absolutely loses it. It was completely insane. Starts screaming that I need to fetch her groceries right now or she is going to get us all fired and she's an important person and how we will regret treating her this way. Blah, 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 blah. The gentleman finally gets a word in edgewise and again informs her I don't work there and I don't have to do anything for her. That is when I can see a dim little bulb go off in her head and can see a glimmer, tiny but there, of understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. This dim light is, however, quickly squashed by her overinflated sense of entitlement as she promptly replies in the snottiest voice possible,
I kid you not with...
Entitled wench. Well, he's obviously a menial of some sort. Make him. To say this got me a tad riled up is perhaps an understatement. So I shoved a one-finger salute into her face and told her emphatically to go screw herself. The gentleman quickly got between us and loudly told her, in no uncertain terms that one, again, I did not work there, and two, that she needed to get out of his store. Right now, right now. She literally screamed at the top of her lungs. No words, just rage, and started demanding to see someone in charge so she could get us all fired and someone better get her groceries, and how she was going to sue us all. Didn't we know how important she was? The gentleman, who I had naturally assumed was the manager, promptly got right back in her face and yelled over her that he was the owner. His family had owned the place for 20 years, and they had never in all that time done someone shopping for them. Ever. He then grabbed her by the arm and literally dragged her off towards the front of the store. At that point, I was just shaking my head in disbelief, but I just went ahead, made my selection of fine coffees, and wandered over to stand in line to pay for it. As I'm there at the register, the owner came up to me and actually apologized for that woman's behavior, and we shared a what the messes moment. Actually ended up just laughing at how stupid she was, or crazy either way. He even tried to let me have the coffee for free, but I thanked him and told him it wasn't his fault that the entitled wench was so stupid, and I was fine with paying for it. Now, you would think that that was the end of it. I mean, it was crazy, but weird stuff happens. People are idiots, whatever. But oh no, dear readers. It would appear that we had both underestimated the depths of that woman's craziness, because as we walked through the door to the outside world, who to our astonishment was there waiting for us? Entitled wench. It turns out she had actually called the police on us, and the dumb brat was out there, screaming at the officer, demanding that we be arrested for not serving her, and how she wanted us both fired, and she was going to sue, and that someone had better get her groceries right now. My jaw dropped, I don't mind saying it, and I was beyond shocked. I honestly started laughing at that point. This lady was certifiably nuts. Because of my job, we happened to work closely with the local PD, so I actually recognized the officer that had responded to the call and gave Officer Betsy a wave when she looked at me. She gave me a grin and walked over asking me about exactly what was going on. We both gave our side of the story, and the owner asked that she be removed from the property, please, as she was at this point causing a scene. Betsy just rolled her eyes, walked over and told the entitled wench that she needed to leave right now immediately or she would be charged with trespassing. Now, do you ever have that moment when you can see something bad start to happen, but your mind just can't quite believe it's actually occurring? Well, I saw it start clear as day as the entitled wench reared back and started to go off again, and yep, there it was. She actually jammed her finger into Officer Betsy's sternum, not once, but twice. Might have been a third time, but Officer Betsy had at that point picked her up, flipped her over, and dropped the entitled wench on her head. Landed on top of her, had her handcuffed in record time, got back up, opened her door, slid her into the back of her patrol car, and slammed the door on her. And we all just stood there shaking our heads in total disbelief as that woman started to scream and thrash about and kick at the windows of the squad car. She was still doing it as Officer Betsy drove off to the station, too. I recently saw a story about entitled kids and horses, and it reminded me of an incident that took place at the end of 2019, pre-COVID. Backstory. A close friend of mine was adopted by a lovely old couple who had already adopted a girl who had been blinded and had major scarring around her eyes important. The couple also had big dogs, the latest generation of which was a cross between a half-husky, half-German shepherd. They had puppies with an Irish wolfhound. So very big, very hairy, and absolutely gorgeous doggos. They had one of these puppies trained to be a blind assistance dog for their blind daughter, as well as being trained for general help around the house. During this process, the dog got very close with the blind girl and very protective. Important. Anyways, on to story. All names are fake. Cast. Bella, my friend. Zoe, the blinded girl, my friend's adopted sister. There's also the adopted father, Echo the service doggo, and of course the entitled mother and her brat kid. The incident. I'd gone round to Bella's house to see her and to get her help with some schoolwork I was doing. After finishing the work, me, Bella, and Zoe, decided to go out for a walk and take Echo with us to give him his daily exercise. As this would involve going outside, Zoe put on a headscarf and very large dark sunglasses to hide her scars, as well as taking her white cane. Together we walked to a nearby park playing field and let Echo off the lead to run him around. After about 20 minutes, we noticed a typical Kara and her hell spawn come onto the field. I called Echo over and put his lead back on him, and also put his service vest on, a high-vis vest with service dog. Do not pet written in big letters on both sides. So it is obvious he is working. Echo, being very well trained immediately, went into service dog mode and was helping Zoe navigate around the field. We went and sat on some benches outside the play area, about 10 meters away from Karen. Echo sat down about 2 meters away, directly in front of our bench. We were just chilling and chatting when we hear squealing and running footsteps. The entitled kid had seen Echo. Before we could react, the kid had sprinted over and charged straight into Echo, knocking him over and obviously hurting him as he yelped and was frantically wriggling as the kid tried to pin him to the ground while shouting, "Mummy! Mummy! Mummy! Look at the doggy!" Karen didn't move or even look up from her phone. By now, Echo was in obvious distress, and Bella stood and grabbed the kid, lifting him off the dog and putting him down away from him, whilst telling him to please not touch our dog. The entitled brat screamed and shouted incoherently, and as soon as Bella put him down, he punched her straight in the stomach, which made her drop the kid and tried to tackle Echo again. This time, however, he was ready and shied away, causing kid to trip and start crying. As if summoned by the cries of her hellspawn, the entitled mother leapt to her feet and began screaming at us. "What are you doing? I can't believe you'd hurt a child," etc. All this shouting was freaking Zoe out, and she started shaking. "Bella, ma'am, your child attacked my sister's service dog. Please, can you take him away?" Karen looked at Echo's vest and said, "Well, you shouldn't bring your service dog to a public park then, you brat." Unfortunately, Zoe chose this moment to speak. "Guys, can we get out of here?" The entitled mother saw Zoe's headscarf and glasses and launched into a tirade about disrespect and terrorists and look at me when I'm talking to you, and grabbed Zoe's headscarf and glasses, pulled them off her and threw them on the ground. Two things happened nearly instantly. Karen began screaming in horror at the scars on Z's face, and the entitled kid launched himself at Echo again. This time Echo snapped. He had been attacked and hurt, and now his child was being threatened. Echo sighed, swiped the kid in midair, then shoulder charged into the entitled mother before standing in front of Zoe showing his teeth and barking. Still screaming, the entitled mother pulled out her phone and called the police while dragging her child away and yelling at us that, "You're all going to jail for scaring my child and bringing that into a public place." Zoe was understandably traumatized, so we rang her father to come and help us. Their father and the police arrived at the same time. He came over to us to talk, and the police officer took the entitled mother's statement, then came to talk to us. After talking to Bella and their father, the police officer asked if Echo had bitten the kid. We all said no, just knocked him over. The police officer then said that the kid had cuts on his arms. Turns out the mother had deliberately cut her child to make it look like Echo had bitten him. Whilst we were being questioned, we had been taken about 5 meters away from the bench. The entitled mother had let the kid go back to the park. Zoe was still sitting on the bench and Echo was laying next to her. The kid decided to try again and came charging over to Echo. This time, however, their father stepped in and told him that he couldn't touch the dog as he was a service dog. The entitled mother saw Bella and Zoe's father talking to her child and flew into a rage, shouting about assault, and then shoved their father out of the way, grabbed Echo's lead, knocked Zoe to the floor and tried to run all in about 5 seconds. As the cops ran to grab her, Echo launched himself into the air to run back to Zoe, pulling the entitled mother over, making her graze her arms as she was being detained. She was shouting about how Echo was an aggressive dog and needed to be put down, only to be told she was being arrested for assault and public order offenses. Long story short, the entitled mother got fined in 8 months jail time and had to pay Zoe and her father each something close to $5,000 for damages. Zoe still hates going out and had 2 fractured ribs from that evil kid. The dad came to pick the entitled kid up and has since divorced Karen and got full custody of the evil kid. 6 months after the incident, he went to my friend's house with the kid to force him to apologize, which the kid did, then explained that his mom told him that was how he should act around dogs. Hopefully the dad can make sure he grows up to not be entitled. This happened a few days ago, and it still makes me pissed.
So the house next door was turned into a daycare in the beginning of August, and I've never had any problems with them until a few days ago.
In my country, the layout of the houses is completely different, and we have walls around our houses. I don't know if this is relevant, but okay. I was hanging in the backyard listening to some music. It was very hot, and I wanted to get away from the electronics for a while, so I decided to just chill there. From my porch, I heard the kids playing and screaming, so I turned the music a little bit louder and figured it would be okay. My mom was at work, and my father was out of town for a few days, so it wouldn't bother anyone. Just for clarification, the songs were family-friendly. I turned off the music and went inside as the sun was setting. That's when I heard the doorbell. I thought it was mail since I was expecting a package to be delivered. I answered it, and that's when I knew trouble was coming. Me. Who is it? Entitled mother. Oh, I am the entitled mother. My son goes to the daycare next door. I went outside and opened the gate just to see the Karen of the Karens right in front of me. The woman had the typical Karen haircut and blonde, almost yellow hair. I just put a smile on my face and tried to be nice. Me. How can I help you? Entitled mother. Hi, sweetie. I noticed you were listening to some music. It was you, right? I recognized the voice from the pitchy singing. Yes, it was me. Again, how can I help you? You know, that wasn't an appropriate song for a young lady like you. Pardon me? Sorry if this seems out of the blue. I'm just trying to look after the kids, you know? The volume was really loud, and the lyrics were very inappropriate. Where's your mommy so that I could talk to her? Yeah, she did say mommy as if I were 5. For some reason, I started laughing, thinking the situation was funny, since I never imagined this kind of thing would happen to me. I have a history of laughing in very inappropriate situations. As I laughed, the entitled mother's face would just get redder, and she started to pound her feet on the ground and pout at me. Entitled mother, what is so funny? Me, nothing. Where is your mother? I need to talk to her about your behavior. Well, my parents aren't home. And no, the lyrics were not inappropriate. It didn't even have curse words on it. And even if it had, I don't think my mommy would mind. Well, I'm going to wait here until they get back, just to be sure. I don't want my kid and the others to listen to this nonsense. You'll wait here until my mother gets home? Why? I will if I have to. I just closed the gate on her face and went back inside. She started screaming, but I can't remember what she was saying. After a few minutes, I heard the doorbell again, but this time it wasn't her. It was the police. She called the cops on me and claimed that I was mentally harming the kids with my loud, inappropriate music. I explained everything to the officer, and he asked if he could hear the song. I showed it to him, and he said it was fine and warned me to keep it down so I don't bother the neighbors. The entitled mother kept staring at me as I closed the gate. I just smiled and waved at her as it closed. I am pretty sure I heard a very bad slur on my way inside. A few hours later, she harassed my mother in the entrance of the house and also as my mom parked in. My mom just ignored her.